We are
Hello,
live.
everybody.
Yeah, we are live.
And welcome to Truth Proof.
Yeah.
Are you all right, Les?
Yeah, not too bad, Paul. And how are you?
Well, I'm speaking from a sunny Bridlington because I've done it again. I've exposed myself to a bit more of this radiation. But no, it's been a great day, so I'm not complaining. And it's great to see everybody in chat. Them numbers are building already. And as always, we say it every week, don't we? But thanks for support, guys. And what a great guest we've got tonight, Katie Paige.
Great, it's brilliant, yeah. And just say at the top of the show, if you've got any questions for Katie tonight, please put those questions in caps so I can see them easier. And that would be great. And as you say, great support. Welcome everybody to the show.
Yeah, and
just one thing, little thing I want to bring up for people. If you're not on TikTok, get on TikTok because we've just put a great little video on there. It's part of a longer video. It's about 40 seconds or so. And you'll be amazed at what you see. And this is taken from Bempton Cliffs, wasn't it, Paul?
Bempton Cliffs last Saturday. Another crazy bit of footage. And it's just before Katie came, just before we come on air, we're talking to Katie about this phenomena, whatever it is. I don't think it's this particular bit of sighting has done something behind our backs, but everything seems to be when you least expect it. We didn't go up to really look for unexplained phenomena on this occasion. We went up just for a natter because I needed to talk to somebody about something. But yeah, we captured it. But let's just have a look in this chat, Les. And we've got nearly 100 people in chat already. And Steve Colling, Tom Waters, Granny Toots, that's a good name. I've not. And Mark McClinchley, Sober Carper, Stargaze Returnal, Jojo, Matthew Cook, Simon Riley. We've done a Doc Sausage. Let's have a look. Margaret Webster, Daz. I think Linny will be in, Mrs. Linny, Mia Girl, Pete will be watching in background. You get yourself on here, Pete. I say every week. Dragonborn will be in, and we'll have a little bit of a Richard also. Every time I say it, I can't get away from it. I've just seen that Dogman TP Humpton, Paul Hascoff. So we'll catch up with you guys in a while. And as we've said, we're talking to Katie Paige, author. I think it's what's the letters of love and light. I think the inspiration was Leo Sprinkle, an absolutely amazing researcher, but no doubt Katie will tell us that. Researcher, an incredible researcher in her own right, as you know, Les, because we've had Katie's, I think she's been on twice before. And her YouTube channel is the Rocky Mountain Ranch Research. So let's bring Katie on, Les, and let's go from there.
There we go.
Hello, Katie.
Hello, hi, Les. Hi, Paul. I'm so glad to be back. I'm always looking forward to catching up with you guys.
No, it's lovely to have you back on, and it's absolutely we want to know what's new with the research, and for people that aren't familiar with what you're about and the research that you've done, let's start at the beginning. Let's just jump back to the beginning, and
all right, let's all get really comfortable. Oh my goodness. No, like so many people out there that experience anything in the realm of outside of the box of what we consider normal, right? And it's been a lifetime of that for me, spending time for the 3 years in connection with the Rocky Mountain Ranch, which was featured on the History Channel's Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. And, like so many of us, we go through life, we raise families, we go to school, we're worried about paying the bills. And those questions really never left me. Like, what was all that? What were the cattle mutilations? This is where Linda Moulton Howe got her start back in the mid to late 70s out here in Colorado with the rash of animal deaths and so many other things. The Taos hum, we had the strange hums out there and the strange boxes, which I didn't even pay attention to for a while, the unmarked helicopters and, UFO sightings and cryptids and on and on and on and on, this huge rabbit hole that we all find ourselves going down. And it was so cool, Paul, the first time I came on this show and to learn of the similarities around the globe. Do
you know, Katie, I was just thinking when you said the boxers, it's not even a question I was going to ask, but obviously you've just said that, and the cubes, as I'd called them, and we get reports, and we're getting increasingly people coming to us with reports of cube-shaped objects moving through trees. There's a guy in chat, Stephen Colling, and he put me in touch with someone recently who'd seen, it weren't cubes, it was an oblong, but it were moving through the trees, a black oblong-shaped object, and I went and spoke to a witness. And do you find that that's on the increase, or or is it everything's sort of pretty much running along and ticking along like it always has done, or are our sightings increasing for you?
Yeah, well, here's what I think is important about this. And even myself, like I kind of try to balance myself from being an experiencer on one hand to a researcher and investigator on the other hand, where I like, archives and documents, and I want proof, like, truth proof, right? I want the proof. And this is such a trickster, hard world to research, because it's hard to find that proof, because a lot of it is just witness testimony. So there's things I didn't talk about for a long time, but I'm so happy that, not only myself, but you and Trey Hudson does the South Skinwalker Ranch,
Meadow project.
and the Meadows projects, he has had instances with these strange boxes or cubes, and they're different sizes and shapes. 1974, we have the Carl Higdon case out in Medicine Bow, Wyoming, that encountered a box. And the more that you and I and other people talk about their strange encounters, and I think it's fascinating that the person in chat, I hope he's in here, has these moving through the trees, because that was what I encountered in the daytime, was this box near the trees and the woods on the ranch. The more we talk about it, as strange as it is, and people might think like, whoa, what in the heck, they're crazy. But the more we talk about it, the more I'm hearing about it. I mean, just visiting David Marler's National UFO Historical Record Center, he actually saved, and he has a part of his trailer that he's still processing this stuff. And he goes, "Oh, Katie, I saved this picture." And it's somebody who witnessed several cubes in flight. Like, they're not aerodynamic. I mean, right?
That's how we're going to say that. There's nothing aerodynamic, and it's not even a word. But what you're doing by talking about it, what I'm doing, and people like Steve in chat finding us these witnesses, we're kind of de-crazifying it, because, like you said,
de-crazifying.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing is, as if talking about, people used to talk about flying saucers or intelligent spheres of light. Then we jump to cubes, and there's, like you said, there's nothing aerodynamic about them. They shouldn't be flying through the air. What are these things? Are they the same things? Are they the spheres of light that have somehow just morphed into a different shape? It's so hard to, I don't know. I really don't. All we can do is document it. As you said, most of it is anecdotal. The bulk of the information that we're receiving, it's anecdotal. There's very little that we can actually nail down and say, let's take this to the populace, and this is our proof. But surely anecdotal evidence en masse should count for something.
That's right. I mean, when we have cases, and we have case after case after case, and we can document these throughout history. And that's why I'm an advocate for history. And just Les and Paul and I were talking before I came on the show about how AI and, now we have Grok, where we're just asking the computer for all the answers to all of our questions. Is that going to help us or hurt us? Right. And in some ways, I think it muddies the waters, and it helps us in a lot of ways, but there's also a downside to it. Wouldn't you agree, Paul?
I totally agree. And when you think about all the I know this isn't exactly unexplained phenomena, but all the technology that's stopping us or aiding us and stopping us doing the physical, you can kind of, let's imagine then that the aliens, these advanced species who look so weak and feeble in many instances, you could imagine at some time during their evolution, they've gone through this process and they've lost the need to do anything physical, to do anything. So therefore the body has kind of atrophied, and it doesn't need muscle. It just needs a big brain. To sort of process.
Let me grab something here in my drawer. But one of the things that was reported, so let me just kind of back up again. So APRO, which is the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization, and they were very active, in the 60s and the 70s and that. And so for over 35 years, the APRO reports go missing. Nobody had access to them. And just recently, David Marler outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico, got access to the APRO files. So, and now it's housed, it's public. So anybody can visit the National UFO Historical Records website and plan a visit. If you ever find yourself in New Mexico, make an appointment to go to this archives, because not only is one whole side of the wall all the app profiles, but you have original Project Blue Book and Kufos and NICAP and original auto recordings and all of this. And going through the app files of the Rocky Mountain Ranch of my childhood, which, you know, years ago when I started on this journey, I didn't know it was ever investigated.
That was going to be a question. I was going to say to you, where would you have been if you hadn't have read Hunt the Skinwalker?
I wouldn't be anywhere, actually. I would just be investigating lights in the sky, because it wasn't until I picked up this book, and I picked it up because I'm like, oh, it's about a ranch in Utah. Maybe it has some similarities to what happened to me as a child in Colorado, not knowing anything at the time. Skinwalker Ranch, it was known, but not to the height that it is now. Like now it's very popular. Everybody knows about the Skinwalker Ranch. And I started reading other hotspots and started reading about this ranch in Colorado. And I knew the strange dynamic of the family and my mother dating, you know, Jack, who was married, and all that whole thing. And luckily for me, they said that Dr. Leo Sprinkle, PhD, was an investigator. John Durr, who I am in contact with via email up to this day. He's still with us, Dr. John Durr, and Peter Van Arsdale as well. I've contacted him. And had I not picked up this book, I wouldn't be here right now doing the work. No. But going back to what you were saying about AI and being atrophied, let me grab this picture. Hold on. All right. Yeah. I tried to organize myself and I put all this stuff away, and I usually have it sitting out on the table. But in the APRA report of the ranch, there were 2 types of beings that were said to have been there. These AI type, what Paul Giamatti named the Tubi guys. And you just described, and I feel like they're connected to the boxes, and they might be AI in nature, and they look like this. Very kind of scrawny and pathetic, and very interesting.
Interesting. They don't look particularly nice, do they? They're not very, but the box type figure you've just shown me. I'm not going to say his name. I know he'll be actually listening to this, but there's a good friend of mine, of ours. I'll say ours because the people in the chat will know what I mean. And he got up in the night about 3 weeks ago, and he'll be shaking his head because he never comes in chat. He always observes. It's quite reserved. He said, I got up in the night about 3 weeks ago, so I'm sorry for telling your secret here. He said, as I'm observing from the bathroom, something the shape of a white carrier bag came along the hall, and it was moving, and it just disappeared through the wall. He's never said anything like that before. I'm sorry for not for breaking your secret there, mate, but it was just when you showed me that cube type being, and that a drawing. Obviously, it's not a photograph, but once again, it's anecdotal. It's people's memories, but it's got to count for something. And I think by showing that, Katie, and me speaking about that particular instance just then, it might give other people the courage who've seen similar things and think, God, that's just ridiculous.
Right.
How can I talk about something as ridiculous as that? And they think, hey, I'm not on my own here.
Right. Yeah. What's interesting about that too is back early on when I started out kind of going into MUFON as an investigator, and at the time I was the guest speaker coordinator, and we invited a gentleman who wrote a book called Flashbacks by the name of Sean Bartok to come speak about his experiences at his property. Come to find out, his property was only 14 miles away from the Rocky Mountain Ranch property in my childhood. And I'm sitting watching his presentation, and up pops a drawing of the beings he encountered, almost identical. The Tubi guys, they were in the neck. That drawing I just held up where they're in the neck. Yeah. He said they came out. So when they came out, they looked like this. So that was his drawing of this tube creature that he saw. And also in the report, in the upper report, it said there were 2 types witnessed and seen on the ranch property, these blonde, blue-eyed Nordic types, and these Tubi guys that are very kind of AI, and that they were in conflict with one another. And I'm wondering if that's what the conflict is or was or continues to be, and where humanity is going in connection with AI.
Okay, so we'll stay with that. That the other intelligences, these other beings, what's their role with us then? What like you said, the Nordic type of being that's been reported, are they sort of good for mankind? What you come away with when you've listened to witnesses talk about this?
Yeah, it's so hard to say because, you know, you and I both know the longer you're in this, you hear of the different types of
The
beings
less you
that
know,
that
yeah.
that supposedly are interacting with humankind for centuries, probably goes way back, right? Could be under our oceans, all that connected to the pyramids. So we hear the tall gray, the shorter grays that are more AI robotic, you know, the reptilians, the Nordics, you know, and on and on and on, right? There's so many different types. These blue ones, I was always kind of, where are the blue ones? The smoky blue skin. But I kind of don't like putting them all in good or bad baskets.
No.
I don't know what the conflict is. Maybe perhaps certain beings are interested in our planet for whatever reasons, for minerals, or I've heard it even said with the cattle mutilations, and we'll go down that in length here in a while when we talk about Snippy the horse. But the cattle mutilations, I've heard there's copper in the blood, and perhaps they're interested in the blood of these animals for that reason. You know, we might have other natural resources that they're interested in, and maybe they could care less about what we do. We're destroying ourselves. We're horrible to each other. Everything's a mess. It's getting messier. And maybe we're entertainment. Who knows? I mean,
you know, we think it's so important, and like you've just said, we might be the last thing on their mind when they're going through this process. We could just be another specimen that needs close scrutiny. I mean, do you think then that, like you said, you don't know whether it's good interaction or bad interaction? Do you think that it depends on the individual, what they want from the individual, the outcome of the experience that certain individual is going to have?
Yeah, that's something I've been more and more interested in lately, and where a lot of my research has been taking me, even for my own experiences. I've always had that strange question, you know, when we get a case or we get a report, and oftentimes, you know, cases and reports go up in the spring and summer when people are outdoors. Obviously, they're out camping and doing their thing, and you have groups of people that have encounters or paranormal things that happen to them. And for some reason, it happens to certain individuals more than other individuals. Even the case of my sister and I, where I've experienced much more of the hitchhiker phenomenon, and she has less of that. Is it because of it's her will, it's her choice to block that? And are we individually active participants in causing the phenomenon? I believe that the more and more we look at this, the more I think that's probably true.
The more it looks at us, and I think you're right. So then, do you think? I mean, all we can do is speculate, Katie, and I don't know. Do you think that we can actually bring the phenomena forward and or enhance it, and I don't know, bring it to us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I do. I mean, it's just like anything. If you're in a dark cave and you have a flashlight, what you put your attention to, what you shine that light on, is going to manifest in your life. And so if you're paying attention to these things, these unusual, this world that we all find ourselves in, and you're really digging and reading and absorbing, it's going to open the door for these things to happen. And if you're paying attention and you notice that, then you're going to have that happen. Now, I always say you need to be careful, because we don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know who or what, or the trickster element to it all. And so, you know, I always say, like, be careful with what you ask for.
Which leads me on to what my next question. Have you experienced anything that's been really negative and frightened you then while you've been involved in the research? And I don't mean your first experiences. I mean your experiences when you became aware that there's something happening, and you sort of thought, I don't know when you go from the transition when you think I'm a researcher, but when you start looking into it and you're thinking, I'm a bit too deep into this, I need to step back.
Right. It's such a good question. And I think people, worry sometimes about it. I mean, I was injured both times filming with Beyond Skinwalker back at the ranch. And some people tend to think that it's a negative, kind of scary, frightening thing. In fact, they're like, how can you even go back there? Because, as a child, I was frightened. I saw shadow figures and different paranormal things. And when you're a kid, you don't know how to process, or, you're boogeyman in the closet, right? Everything's a boogeyman in the closet, boogeyman under your bed. So I was frightened then, but I didn't know. And I guess it's been a slow process through the decades of understanding the power of each and individual person out there and how they can interact with what's happening. And you do have control of what you allow in, how you perceive things and process things. And for me now, it feels more protective and guiding. So that's how I'm able to go back and face it and do the research and do things, because I feel like I'm meant to try to find these answers, and that I'm protected and I'm okay. So no, I don't feel frightened.
No. And does it still give you? It must do, because it does me. I relish going out to these locations. It still gives me like a buzz. I really enjoy going. And I don't know whether that's a bit sad on my part, but to stand in dark, cold places where there's nobody else or very few people. I'm not there on my own. There's a small group of us, but it's just that anticipation that you might see, you might experience something it's absolutely otherworldly, and when it happens, it keeps you hooked. It's got you, and you're there ready to go again.
Yeah, I must say, though, just this last summer, we went to try to find the actual location of the Carl Higdon case out in Medicine Bow, Wyoming. So, he's an oil rigger. If people aren't familiar with this 1974 case, I recommend just typing in, Carl Higdon encounter.
A little bit.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about it. So he's an oil rigger. He actually lives in Rawlins, Wyoming. He is supposed to go to work this day, but his people that he works with are sick, so he has a day off. He decides to go elk hunting in Medicine Bow. So we went to this location to try and find where this encounter happened. It's really interesting because we're driving out there from Rawlins, Wyoming, out into the Medicine Bow National Forest, and it's pretty wide open. You could see for miles out, right? But you get to where Carl Higdon's out there elk hunting, and he's out there in his pickup truck. He goes on this ridge, and it's very treated. It really, really reminded me of the Rocky Mountain Ranch area. So you have ponderosa pines, you have a water element there. It got creepy, and I was a little uneasy, and not so much because of his encounter. So what happens is he sees 5 elk, a beautiful bull elk. He goes to take a shot with his new rifle, and the bullets hits something invisible, and it falls to the ground. And he sees this being who later finds out his name is also one. He has a strange appendage on his arm, for his hand, and he mentally, telepathically asked Carl Higdon, "Are you hungry?" Assuming because he's hunting elk, and he floats over 5 of these pills, and Carl takes a pill and has this where he's entered this large box. It goes into this box and is traveling to another world. It kind of looks like the Space Needle, kind of this planet. He has this interaction. The elk are on board in this box. Long story short, he's missing. He has missing time. His truck is ended up being found a few miles away from where he had parked it in this mud bog. They literally had trouble getting this truck out of this place. Anyway. So this case obviously is interesting to me because it has a box. It's 1974. It's nearby, Colorado. So it was also investigated by Dr. Leo Sprinkle. So at the Heritage Center in Laramie was all the original files. So we have photographs. This has a lot of evidence. There's photographs of this box type marking on the ground where he encountered the box, where the grass had been burned. Yeah, the indentations. There's the inside out shell casing of the bullet. There's medical records. So when they found Carl, there was a party. His wife and others were looking for Carl. They finally find him. His eyes are all burned and watering. He's freaking out, totally delirious. They take him to the hospital. They do blood work on him. Like I said, he's delirious. He doesn't know where he is, kind of amnesia kind of stuff. So Dr. Leo Sprinkle interviewed the nurses and doctors and got medical records. So we have all of those. We have these strange carvings of also one in the aspen trees nearby, which is very unusual. So it's a very, very interesting case. And there's an elk connection, which I think some of these cases have an elk connection.
Oh, really? And can you imagine the head trauma that man must have gone through? Not only what he's gone through sort of visually, physically, mentally, but then he's got to face people who
his whole life
bend their head around it. For the most part, people aren't going to bend their head. So that leads me to another question then, which is away from the ranch, away from everything. Do you think as a society now that we're becoming more accepting of the phenomena? We'll throw that net wide and the unexplained.
I think more people are comfortable with the topic. I mean, just even within the last 10 years, I mean, where people would be more apt to like giggle behind your back on what we do. I think that's less so now, and people are more open to talk about it. So I think, yeah, we're making progress with these I mean, it helps to have these podcasts are huge, right? And the way we communicate has changed, and it's made a huge difference because they're like, okay, this isn't so fringe anymore, you know? So yeah, it's helped a lot. I didn't quite read that question. What did that question say down there? If I could.
Oh, sorry, I didn't even see it. Did you put a question up, Les?
Yeah.
Right. If Katie could visit places to visit during a 2-week USA vacation, what would they be? I'm assuming Al Durham, great guy Al Durham as well. So I'm assuming she means Al means places of unexplained, where unexplained phenomena is reported and experienced.
Yeah, if you're interested in these topics, and I'm going to assume you are, you wouldn't be here. I would you can go to Mount Wilson Ranch and actually stay there and experience that. And he's really close to Area 51. So I would make a trip to Nevada, see all of that, you know, go to the Little Alien, maybe Mount Wilson Ranch. I would definitely find yourself maybe then go into, you know, New Mexico, visit the Historical Archives Center. You could go into Roswell. That's always a fun town to go into. There's so many fun, you know, the Roswell Museum and all that stuff. So you can make yourself kind of like in the movie Paul, right? Where they made, I'm going to go visit the mailbox. Yeah. Make a little map and just hit the Midwest. I would visit the Midwest. How about you
then? So obviously you've ticked off a lot of boxes. You've been to a lot of locations of high strangeness. Where would, because probably Al would aiming it at you. Where would you want to go if there were anywhere that you'd like to visit?
I still haven't been to Skinwalker Ranch, believe it or not. I've been to Blind Frog Ranch, and one of the things that, you know, stuck with me when I was young, even into my 20s, my 30s, kind of fell off maybe mid 40s, was that feeling of being watched, kind of this heavy kind of, I don't know how else to describe it other than a feeling of being watched. And I definitely have that in spades when I visit the ranch. Like it's intense in certain locations. So I wanted to see if I experienced that at Blind Frog. I sat in the little pond there before they had the eel thing, and I felt uncomfortable. The water was freezing cold, first of all. We all got sick after sitting there in cold water. But then I found out like a month or two later, there's this like eel type. I'm like, oh my gosh, I knew there was something in the water there. But the energy there at Blind Frog felt relatively positive and good, and I didn't have that sense. So I'm curious if that would be the case at Skinwalker Ranch. Like, would it feel like it does in the Colorado Ranch? I've always wondered about that. So maybe someday I'll get invited to go out.
I'm sure you will. And so the feeling then of being watched, this strange descent, and often accompanied by what I call the lower silence, this where everything just goes quiet and you could hear a pin drop. What do you think I'm asking a question and I don't expect you to have answers because I haven't got the answers. What do you think the reasons for that could be, Katie? Are we very close to something? We'll call it the phenomena, or is there a bubble of strangeness just enveloped the land? Something. I'm sorry for going on here, but something must be happening to silence the animals, to silence everything else.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I experienced that cone of silence for the first time after Contact in the Desert last year. We stopped in Pioneer Town, California, to interview the widow and daughter of an ex-CIA agent who wanted to talk about, they owned a lot of the property they owned property at Dulce Base, so in the Dulce area. And so we set up that interview, and the town was kind of deserted. It's a cool little town, by the way, very Western. And we were staying in these old, like barrack, kind of like a motel kind of thing, really cool town. And they had these hammocks outside our door and nobody was there. So I'm like, oh, it's a beautiful starless night. Let's go skywatch. And that was the first time that I kid you not, there were like coyotes and dogs in the distance. You can hear cars in the distance. You can hear, regular background noise. Yeah. And all of a sudden I see, as I sometimes do, this flash, just like somebody like old-fashioned camera, like flash in the sky, just a flash. And then the person I'm with, I'm like, did you see this flash? Did it again. and I don't know if it's iridium flare, because we do have the iridiums. The satellites sometimes will glisten, the moonlight or something off of them. So we're watching this light. At that time, it was like somebody just turned down the volume. Everything. You couldn't hear a dog. You couldn't, like, we were
and you all experienced this then?
Yeah. We were like, what? It was like creepy. Like, we got uncomfortable. Like, we need to go in. Something's going to happen. And I feel like you nailed it, Paul, that there's just something like just beyond the veil of what we can perceive with our limited senses. So we are so limited in what we can see and hear and taste and all that. So I feel like it's just beyond the veil, I guess. And it was, and the weirdest thing about it is, so we're like, what is happening right now? Like, oh, we need to go in. It was like somebody slowly turned the volume back up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if, like, recently I watched and listened to the gentleman who wrote the Big Toe books, Thomas Campbell. He was on a Joe Rogan podcast. I thought it was interesting because he talks about this whole simulated theory, simulated universe, which would explain a lot of these different types of phenomena we're having. If that's the case, then let's say in your video game, you're experiencing your wolves and things, and I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing, and that makes a lot of sense to me, but I don't know. My youngest son would poo-poo that and go, yeah, no, there's nothing to that. But
well, it is a strange one. Just before we go on to it, I just saw, because I don't normally see my daughter Sarah Jennison in here, so good to see you, Sarah. Nicknames in Matthew Cook, Steve Collin, we've done Sober Carper. I like to shout people's names out because I just really value support. We both do, myself and Les. Go on, Les. Have you got something to ask?
Great chat tonight and great support on the stream. That's great. We've got some great questions in, Katie, which is always good. And keep the questions coming, folks. I'm going to start off with the Sober Carper, who says, "Hi, Katie. After you appeared on Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, when the phenomenon remembered you, did it start up any activity for you again?"
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's actually started way before Beyond Skinwalker. It was like I had one strange encounter with this basketball-sized blue orb way back when I just started investigating, and kind of, I always call it like opening up Pandora's box to investigating these things. This thing, and I'm glad I journaled about it. So if anybody experiences things, journal it down, because you'll forget. But at the time, my kids were into Legos. So I had a Lego bucket in the bedroom at the time. Lego bucket falls over in the middle of the night. The auto light from the people that lived behind us kept coming on and off. And in the corner of the bedroom was this blue orb. And it felt very intelligent. And I'm like trying to look. I'm trying to look at the smoke detector, the cable box on the TV, trying to figure out what the heck I'm looking at. Wake up my ex-husband, who is now my ex-husband, hey, check this out. The thing just went like this. And from that moment on, I seemed to, whatever was connected to me then, it's just wherever I go, it doesn't matter. I'll have paranormal things. It's interacting. Things will fall over. Pictures will fly off the wall. TVs will turn on. More paranormal type of things will happen like that, for sure. And even on Beyond Skinwalker, you asked about being afraid. I wasn't necessarily afraid, but I was like, I can't believe these guys. So the very first night back filming, this is the first time I've been back on the ranch. We get this unexpected snowstorm where, I take them out. And what's interesting, they don't tell you in the show why we're walking back into the tree line on the show, because I was taking them back to where I had my box encounter. Well, they don't even talk about the boxes on the show. No. But that's, I go over the barbed wire, I kind of fell forward, and that's where these bipedal prints kind of show up out of the snow out of nowhere. They disappear, they show back up, and they disappear again. So I feel like that's a cryptid out there, right? Well, after we filmed all that, it's probably 12:30, in the morning, after midnight, and I'm freezing cold because I was not prepared for that snowstorm. And they're like, well, you can sit in this pickup truck. Well, the pickup, because they had the heat on, and the pickup truck's facing the Ponderosa Pines, where I had all these encounters as a kid. All these guys, the camera crew, they leave and left me sitting in this truck, which to me felt like an eternity. And I'm just like, where did everybody go? And I'm just looking into these dark woods, freezing cold, trying to warm up, doing that.
So that was unnerving.
Yeah, it was unnerving. But in the trees, I see a pinpoint of red light. And I don't know what it was. There was nobody walking back there. There's nothing going on. And I'm just like, okay, this is not funny. This is some sort of But finally they came back and everything was cool. But I did get a little uncomfortable there for a minute. How could they just abandon me here? I'm like, is there a hidden camera somewhere?
just before we move on to the next question, Les, just briefly as you like with it, but you know when the Lego box fell over and the lights flashing, do you almost believe or feel that was this blue orb wanting to get your attention?
I felt it was intelligent and was really interesting. And I don't know if I have the book sitting here. I do. But this book, the second book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon.
Yeah.
This book right here. In this book somewhere, they talk about a blue orb. And what's fascinating about it is, in this book, it states, don't assume that this blue orb is something extraterrestrial in nature. In other words, it could be something that we have, technology that we might have. And I've talked to, interviews I've done with high ups from General Electric that, way up in the company that claim that, we're at least 40 years more advanced than the general population knows, and the technologies that we might have. And who knows, could have started out at Rocky Mountain Ranch, because that property sat vacant for 10 years. So we know that there were soldiers from Camp Carson there. We know that NORAD and Colorado Bureau of Investigations was involved. We know that there was some interesting characters doing things on and around the ranch property and the town itself, this whole area of Elbert County. And that's always been one of my questions. How much of this is our own Black Access projects and how much of this is, paranormal and genuine stuff? And I think it's a combination of both things happening at the same time. And when we, we'll get into the Snippy book Absolutely. And the things we're working on. But I think that's true in the San Luis Valley as well, with Mount Blanca and Crestone and things were going on there. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Okay. But for sure.
Yeah, I got a question from AMG. Why do the aliens, visit at night?
Well, they visit 24/7, I think. I think just we're more aware, or put it this way, we quiet down at night, right? It's still, we're sleeping, we're paying more attention to sounds and light anomalies and things at night. Some of my favorite cases when I was back investigating cases were daytime sighting cases. I just think we're distracted during the day. We're not tuned in during the day. We're not paying attention to the skies as much as we do at night. So I think if you pay attention, you will experience things in the daytime too. And maybe they're just right around us and we're just,
we're not even aware. But plus the fact that if these unknown others want to remain covert, then I would think that the nighttime when we're all sort of, I don't know, switched off, it's sleeping and driving along roads when they're not as busy, that's the time to interact. If you've got a job to do, if we can call it a job, whatever it is they're doing, in some instances.
3 a.m. That's like the 3 in the morning. Everybody's sleeping now. Let's go down and do it. So there's covert.
Yeah, I mean, it interests me because this question, because and it's safe to say that a lot of cattle injuries, shall we say, just trying to keep it YouTube friendly here. Cattle injuries, they seem to appear at night, Katie, don't they?
Sometimes, but we do have the daytime ones as well. I mean, we just a recent one. That's one of the beautiful things about having the opportunity to do the History Channel's Beyond Skinwalker, which season 3 will be out, I believe, in June or July. So, and like all of you, I'll be able to see it for the first time. I could give one little spoiler away without getting in too much trouble, I think, but my sister joins me and I'm really excited that she will be with me on this. But anyway, so I'll be really anxious, like all of you, to see how, they film for a couple weeks and you don't know, it boils down to 44 minutes of, a lot of filming. So I don't know until I see it like the rest of you. But what I was going to say is, these daytime things, so many things, the cattle mutilations, having that opportunity has opened the door to meet other ranchers and other people that live in the area. And just recently, there was a woman that had a mutilation in the daytime right on her property. So, and this is a prize bull. It's like worth, almost $6,000. It's right outside her ranch house. She sees it. They check on it all the time, goes and does a few things. And a couple hours later in the day, the bull's mutilated. So blood drained, everything.
terrible, isn't it? And that had been no easy task if you're looking at a fully grown bull in its prime. I mean, how's anybody going to do that, you know, without totally incapacitating it with a weapon? So it's been weaponed of some kind, hasn't it? So go on then, what's this, Les?
Yeah, and Stephen Collin follows on about these mutilations. Hi, Katie. The mutilations on the ranch, what do the veterinarian think about them? And do you think they can't say anything about them if they found anything unusual, I suppose it means?
Right. Yeah. So, Steve, a great question. And this, you know, the cattle mutilations is such an area of expertise that for the longest time, I'm like, even though it was a huge part of what happened at Rocky Mountain Ranch, I was like, I'm going to leave that to all the other experts because it's such a, it's just such a convoluted, scary, kind of dark, nefarious phenomenon that's worldwide now, as we know, right, Paul? You were telling me about the kangaroos and other animals.
The kangaroos, yeah, that was a big one back in, I think it was 2011, and it weren't just UK, but it was spread nation. It were all around the UK in June, July, but it were also in Australia, New South Wales, all the way up the coast, and the decapitations.
Right. Terrible. And now maybe would be a good time to talk about. So at Contact in the Desert this year, as fate would have it, a couple years ago, one of the members of the King family, well, Nellie King was the owner of Snippy the horse. And for those of you who don't know, Snippy the horse was an animal mutilation that occurred in September of 1967. And before things went viral like they do today, the case of Snippy the horse went viral around the world in newspaper headlines. Like it was just this sensation. Now, we did have animal deaths before Snippy that were, you know, documented, but this was really the first time that an animal mutilation went worldwide. Okay. Yeah. And so this happened in the San Luis Valley of Colorado. So the King family, you know, are descendants of Nellie King, who owned Snippy the horse. And so you guys are the first on here on Truth Proof. We just got this yesterday in the mail. It's our first.
This is the book.
Yeah, this is the new book that'll be available soon.
On Amazon. Is that going to be out on Amazon? Or
it'll be out in Amazon end of May. It's going to debut at Contact in the Desert this year. But it's Snippy the Horse, a King family legacy. And it's written by Tony Angiola and myself, along with the King family, in collaboration with the King family. And how this came to be was I was invited to go out to an event and kind of talk about Rocky Mountain Ranch and the San Luis Valley of Colorado and what I'm doing with the research. And then all of a sudden, bingo, the APRO files are opened up at the Historical Record Center. So we have original photographs that have never been seen before. We have audio recordings and just tons and tons of documents about this case. And finally, after 35 years, we can start getting the truth out there about this case. Here is case in point. You guys will be the first to see this on this show. But here in the APRO reports are first time seen of Snippy, the baby colt, with his mother, Lady. So back in the 80s, Burl Lewis decided to muddy the waters and tell everybody that Snippy wasn't really Snippy, that Snippy was Lady, blah, 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 because he was trying to get the story to go away. Truth of the matter is, they had 4 horses on this property. And something that's really incredible that we uncovered in opening this case back up, they had a black horse named Smokey. They had a brown horse named Sheba. They had the 3-year-old colt Snippy, who was a male gelding. And they had Lady, a gray dapple, who was his mother, 14 hands high, 1,200 pounds. So Lady, the horse, Snippy's mother, was quite bigger than Snippy himself. Yep. And so now for the first time, we have pictures of baby Snippy with mother Lady. And what people didn't know and what we uncovered was the black horse, Smokey, was found dead on the same property a week before Snippy. So, and it was rumored that Smokey probably died of a rattlesnake bite on the hind end, but he was a huge horse. He was 1,200-pound horse. A little rattlesnake bite on the back of his rear would not kill a horse. It would have to get him in his throat, you know, right in his mouth or something. So, and we found out that right next door to the King Ranch was the Wellington Ranch. And the Wellington Ranch was known as the Dead Cow Ranch. They had so many animal mutilations. We had Mr. Wellington, after examining Snippy, the carcass, after he was mutilated, was dead a week later. He died a week later, Mr. Wellington.
Really?
Yeah, we had multiple animals went blinded, would have strange animal growths of their hooves. Something really incredible too. Let me see if I can find the picture in this book. There's so many pictures in this book. So much evidence in this case.
While you're looking for a picture, then are these things still ongoing on these ranches, Katie, or have they simmered down?
Yes, very much. Here's a picture of one of the calves that went blinded there and had the strange growth. We had pictures of burn marks on the ground. A lot of evidence around Snippy that I had no idea that connects to Rocky Mountain Ranch. The boxes were witnessed out there. The strange hums, just like in Rocky Mountain Ranch and like in Taos, New Mexico, were heard out there. Multiple cases of UFOs, UAPs, balls of light flying in and around the San Luis Valley, in and out of Mount Blanca. We have the Chico brushes that are normally 5 to 6 feet high that were smashed down to the ground with a strange tool that had these green ooze, original map drawings, the strange circles on the ground. So at the Rocky Mountain Ranch, many of you who have seen Beyond Skinwalker know of this circle where me and my sister flew the Frisbee, and they call it the landing site now, where the rocket went up and fell right at the landing site. Well, that was measured in the APRA files as being 75 feet in diameter. Well, at the Snippy case, they had a 75-foot diameter circle around Snippy. And around that were 5 15-foot round burns on the ground, which is fascinating because it had rained days before Snippy was mutilated. And you could see where these large circles are. You don't have the rain divot. So something was blocking the rain where these circles are. And another fascinating thing, oh my gosh, it goes on and on and on. But in the APRA files were these hand-drawn maps. So at this time, we had lost Smokey the week before. So that leaves 3 horses on the property: Lady, Snippy, and Sheba. So you have a map of, you could see the horses, all 3 of them are like going in the zigzag pattern as if they were being corralled by unusual lights. Then you see Lady and Sheba's horse tracks go back to the King Ranch. You see Snippy's tracks go in a circle, and then 25 to 30 feet away is dropped from above, because Snippy's back right leg was broken as if dropped from above. And another thing that was not well known. So if you've seen the iconic pictures of Snippy where he is cauterized, and his whole neck, skin, all of that is gone. His back left leg was also bare to the bone. They don't talk about that. Another strange anomaly around Snippy was when they found the carcass, when they found Snippy a few days later, his bones were bleached white. A week later, they turned bright pink. And a week after they turned black. So we have these strange things happening with the bones.
Wouldn't normally happen. Yeah.
High radiation readings were taken. Oh, and that's the other thing. Around the Chico brushes, there were these strange indentations, and there's pictures in the book. All of this stuff has pictures, which is amazing. And at the time, they literally casted these indentations. We have pictures of Lonnie Zamora from the Socorro case, comparing the indentations from the Socorro landing case to the Snippy the horse case. Now, Tony Angiola and Ben did a wonderful book on Socorro. They know the measurements of those and everything. And although they were similar, they weren't identical. Like the ones found at Snippy were 2 inches wide, 4 inches deep. The ones at Socorro were not exact to that. But so many different types of evidence, similarities between Rocky Mountain Ranch, Socorro, and other cases. And that's why going back and digging up these historical cases is so important. Because it's so important. Yeah. Not only to get the story right, to the best of our ability. I'm not saying everything is absolutely correct, but at least we can go back to the original source material, as Dave Marler likes to say. It's the original source material and the original recordings, and put it together, in a way that people can, look at it and decide for themselves.
Well, people will have to look out for the book. When's it going to be available on Amazon?
Yeah, end of May. So this is first round. We're kind of tweaking now, but so here's another thing. So this was another picture of the sheared off. There were 3 fence posts that were sheared off, and back, if you could see the circle right here, there is a disc in the distance. It looks like a UFO. You can see the energy around it. And there's another photograph in here too that taken the day of Snippy's capture, and Agnes King, who is Nellie's mother, and she's in her 80s at the time, she witnesses something large come over the ranch house, the hum sound, everything like that, and they capture a picture, and you could see an oblong shaped craft in the picture. Right. So I'm like, holy smokes, why has this been not discovered before? So all of this will be in the book.
You've highlighted it today, and I'm sure people will be avid readers of the book, hopefully, Katie, so that will be good. Do we have more questions?
Yeah, sure. And Stephen Collin is asking, Katie, does anyone on the ranch carry firearms? And if they do, why don't they defend themselves against these entities? I'm sure I would.
But it's invisible. This is, for the most part, what we're defending ourselves against.
Yeah. That's a great question too. I mean, this is something I dug up in, all these newspaper articles here from back in the day. And one thing I discovered, I think this is, these are all articles here. One thing I discovered was back when all this was at the height. So Linda Moulton Howe's out there, and, we have NORAD was involved, and Air Force Academy and Colorado Bureau. And they had in the mid 70s, right? We're talking 1975 to 1978. $10,000 is a lot of money. So the Cattlemen's Association had a $10,000 reward at the time to try and find, who are flying these, mysterious blacked out helicopters, which there's a great document here called The Choppers and the Choppers that go in depth about this whole phenomenon. But so $10,000, we had ranchers 24/7 watching the skies, trying to collect $10,000 reward money to catch the mutilators, not only the mutilators of the cattle and the horse and, other animals as well, but to try and identify who's flying these mysterious choppers, which they never did. So they were arming themselves too. And that's why the governor got involved and said, look, something really bad's going to happen. You just didn't drive up to somebody's ranch at night, or you're going to end up killed. Yeah. So it was a problem that people were definitely arming themselves. And of course, one of my questions I always had too, which came first, the chicken or the egg? We have notes in Dr. Leo Sprinkle's files that, to downplay the undersheriff was Bill Waugh. And I flew to Florida, interviewed his widow who recently passed and his son, Keith. And they were telling me about, how NORAD and Air Force head had a directive to downplay the animal mutilation deaths, to downplay the sightings, because they didn't want people panicking. And same with George Yarnell. They're both featured in Linda Moulton Howe's movie A Strange Harvest as well. You can see him in that.
And I don't think anything's changed there, in that respect, Katie. When I were investigating the sheep fatalities, 2017 to 2019, and it had been happening before. I wasn't at the start of it. I found out about it when it were ongoing. But people said to me, well, did anybody inform police? Because you were just talking about people armed and sort of... Right. Did anybody tell the police? Weren't they aware? Yeah, they were. And at one stage, they were actually staking out the field, the affected area. They didn't do weeks and weeks of it, but they did. But I'll tell you what, the next morning, there was one of the animals killed. Yeah. They'd not seen a thing. And they'd got night vision.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think some of them these animals can be pre-marked or pre-targeted, and we're seeing signs of that in different things. But also, I think one of your listeners asked about what the veterinarians think. Through the decades, they're not able to explain the cauterization. And in the Snippy, the horse case, we had he remained a mysterious figure for a while because he was a doctor and he didn't want his reputation tarnished. But Dr. Altschuler was out there, and he was a blood specialist. And I just recently had a really wonderful conversation with Linda Howe, and she's going to write a little intro letter for this book. So I'm waiting for that. So I'm excited for that. And but she had a lot to say about what these veterinarians, even back in the late 60s, Dr. Altschuler was doing with Snippy the horse and the blood. And I mentioned the copper in the blood and the draining of the blood out of these animals. And, I often wonder, we know that these elk also are found this way, and other animals. I've even heard of wild or ocean life being mutilated. Yeah, mammals. So
we're getting seals, dolphin, all sorts of sea mammals. But we've got a question here from Al Durham. Go on, Les.
Yeah, so I think you've gone into this territory, Katie. What do vets say about the soft tissues that are taken during animal mutes? What would a vet analyse them for? I know you said you're not an expert in any of this earlier on, Katie, but what procedures do you think they would go through?
Yeah, I'm finding myself I can't avoid the topic because it's just so prevalent out here. I'm like, okay, this is a big part of what's going on. I can't ignore what's happening. So I'm inadvertently finding myself in this world, but definitely through the decades, we're talking if we start in 1967 with Snippy the horse and we continue on down through the decades, there's certain obvious organs and soft tissues that are being taken: the tongue, the eye, the ear, the genital things, the blood being drained. I mean, your tall tales, these signs that these are in fact actual mutilations. Why are they taking that? Now, another question: is this extraterrestrials that are doing this? Is this our own government? A lot of these, and I think it was not Chuck Zukowski. He did a lot of great work as well, but Christopher O'Brien did a lot of great work on the animal mutilations along with Linda Howe, and specifically in the San Luis Valley area. And so I credit the late Chris O'Brien to a lot of the work he did. But he did a map showing like nuclear fallout or testing sites. And even in Rocky Mountain Ranch, we had the Titan missile silos. So is it also part of us testing the groundwater, mad cow disease? We would take the soft tissues from that. But there's just so many unusual type of things that are happening. We can't put them all in that category. I think it's a combination of both, and have you guys seen Investigation Alien with, Oh, it's great. It's on Netflix. It's a whole series called Investigation Alien. And on the first episode, you have George Knapp, and they talk about animal mutilations. And there's a rash of them going on right now in Oregon. And they talk to this wonderful rancher who is a multi-generational rancher. And he has this large, probably 75-foot circle on his thing. But he even says he witnessed a UFO, shot at it. And this is a credible guy. One of his animals that were mutilated, one of these bulls, was dead and mutilated, sitting up, like really creepy stuff. Then his son and daughter have footage of this beautiful bull elk, and they're just filming this beautiful bull elk. Behind him is this strange, it's not a human, the animal's not reacting, and it's just kind of floating behind him. I had to slow that. I asked George Knapp. I'm a co-host on UAP Studies podcast with Jason Gilmat out of Canada and Dr. Michael. And I asked George Knapp when he was on about that footage, and he slowed it down. He said it's the strangest thing, and it reminded me of the Carl Higdon case with the elk.
Yeah,
it's like, whoa,
there's so many similarities.
Yeah.
Jump into the sheep fatalities 2017-19, what I've just been talking about. It's only my belief, but I don't believe that it was human intervention, because I spent best part of 2.5 years on those fields in the darkness, getting to cancel out crows, removing the eyes and other things. But obviously that doesn't cancel out humans. But I saw no evidence of no presence of any other human being by myself there. Do you know what I mean? And before somebody puts their hand up and said, well, it were you then, Paul, it were happening way before I got involved. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But it's fascinating. Is there any more questions? I see Mick Park put a question.
Yeah, I saw Mick Park in the chat, and welcome to the show, Mick. Yeah, and for those who don't know, Mick Park co-produced the wonderful music for our film
Wolflands.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. It's worth watching Wolflands just to listen to the music.
Yeah, it's great.
We got Alistair Lavers in. Alistair Lavers were in Wolflands, so it's great to see you, Alistair. I don't know who Dan Brown is, but good to see you, my friend. Moondog and nickname Ginge, Drew Hollins, to name but a few. We've got 220 people here.
It's well worth the $3 download there, Katie. Already done it.
So go on then, Les. Have we more questions?
Yeah, well, Zeno, absolutely. I'll let you one of you guys read this one out.
I felt as if reality has these boss areas designed to act as a spiritual battle tutorial mode to enhance long suppressed psychic powers, heavily used in the past. Silence is part of the battle mode. That's a mouthful, Zeno.
That is so true. And this person is spot on. I mean, think about it. Think about a world that we would be living in if we all knew what reality actually is, and if we knew the power of our own things that have been suppressed. Our pineal glands have been shrunk down to nothing, so we can't manifest. We can't experience. And that if we all had the ability to reopen that up, oh my gosh, what a different world. It's the powers that be that want to keep us down and controlled and living in fear. That's a big one. I mean, oh my gosh, it's the battle of struggling day to day to pay the stinking bills and all that stuff that just keep us trapped.
And maybe that's the reason. Maybe that enhances and brings forward these suppressed abilities and I don't know what the other word is for it after an experience, because when you've had an experience, a lot of people seem to experience more.
Right. You open the door and, and I think we've talked about this in the past, maybe not, but we talked about the disassociation piece of things. And whatever means you disassociate from your physical bodies, whether it's through meditation, near-death experience, a lot of trauma will do that, right? You will kind of leave your bodies when you're under severe stress and trauma. When we tend to disassociate, and it's been studied for decades. I mean, back to the Freudian days, there's books about this disassociation and the ability to have interactions with the paranormal, whether it's ETs or ghosts, that it occurs more when we're able to, just like with the gateway program or whatever, you start opening that up. Once you're connected into that, whatever ether it is, whatever web of the universe, you kind of have that connection wired.
It's difficult to find. It's difficult, Katie, for me anyway, to find a vocabulary for what you're trying to convey there. But I know what you mean. And I don't think I could convey it in the second book, but the subtitle of the second book was Beyond the Thinking Mind, because it's that disassociation. And if you can switch off from what people now consider the real TV soaps and just general life order, then you can connect with the unknown other, I think.
Right. That's why when you go out to nature and you're walking in nature, and you said it, Paul, you're not crazy for wanting to go out there although when we went to the Carl Higdon site, we were uncomfortable, not because of nature and the birds and where we were. We were uncomfortable because there were squatters like less than a mile away. And we don't know if they're going to come and have a gun or rob us or try to take our vehicle. That's what I was afraid of, the human element of what's around me, the human element. But when you connect into nature, whether it's whatever, trees, birds, animals, you connect into something greater. And that's when you're going to open the doors to things.
Yeah, I would agree.
And if you pay attention, and that's why you're drawn to it. That's why I'm drawn to it. And so many people are.
You think, Katie, that humans as we are now, as we've evolved so far, are we on track to be enhanced humans or hybrids? And is this why all this alien interactivity is taking place? Are we on track to be something else?
I think we're on track to take a turn left or right. I think we're, just like Elon Musk said years ago, I think at the beginning he was sort of anti-AI and, oh my gosh, once we open this, we can never go back. And then he kind of changed and took it on. Well, if we can't beat it, join it, let's control it, and made a big shift. And perhaps that's, we can't turn back now. It's out there. We have Grok, we have AI, we have Optimus Prime, all that stuff. So here we go. Where is that going to take us? I mean, it's scary. At some point, we think about how we're going to be replaced by AI and jobs that they can do. We have pictures now on the internet of AI cleaning our toilets and but we humans need this work. We need jobs.
And we will atrophy. We will start to shrink in stature as the machine does the work for us. I know we touched on that earlier, but like you just said, we've got to do what we're going to do as a populace if everything is done for us. We'll be in containment centres, being rationed food and being on school dinners. It's in the future.
I mean, humans really we're going to have to come to a crossroads eventually. How much power are we going to allow these AIs to take over?
So one question I don't think we've asked Katie in any of the podcasts, where does the human soul come into this? Is the human soul going to be incorporated into AI? Does the human soul exist in your eyes?
That could be the key to everything, right, Les? I mean, in going through boxes and boxes of stuff, I even got a big collection from John Schuessler, who's one of the founding fathers of MUFON. He's here in Colorado, and just through the line, I got some boxes of his research. And going through that, I came across some kind of frightening documents, like, oh my gosh, this is what's being suppressed. And one of those was talking about these human soul recyclers. And ironically, they talk about these human soul recyclers as being boxes, a box on the dark side of the moon, of these different boxes. And when we lose our physical bodies, our souls go into these recyclers. And in there, it kind of says that there are ETs out there that are feeding on the human experience, the human emotion, the human souls. And that's why we're being recycled, and why our life on this planet can be so difficult. And quite frankly, it makes me mad because they want, and even like if you look into MK Ultra and things like this, they were very interested in trauma in children specifically, that adrenaline, that we have, and our aliens feeding on human misery, basically is what it was saying. And it was quite frightening to read that. Like, we are just these disposable test experiments where they're feeding off of our souls. And I hope that is not true, because what a horrible cycle to be on, right? And we're all like, well, this is a hard place to be, Earth. The human experience is a difficult one. And if we're just this consumption for some other being out there, I mean, how do you get off of it? And how do you stop it?
Well, you don't get off it. It's terrifying. But maybe there's good reasons why we don't know, because that's a terrifying prospect. And when you said these things feed off misery, and night people, my own experiences, everything was traumatic. It was horrible.
Yeah.
It was just horrible.
It's like Monsters Inc., right? Monsters Inc., where they're like, ah, and they capture that.
And I think Mick Park has got a question in, and he's just reminding you, Paul. Evening, Paul, and Les Katie. Paul heard the robotic voice a few years ago. It's similar. Is it similar to your own experience?
Yep. I can run through that one first if you want, Katie.
Yeah, give us a little
please
bit of
do.
During the sheep fatalities, I were on those fields 4 or 5 days a week. In fact, the farmer himself were on the days that I didn't fill in, and I'd be there in between 4 and 5 a.m. in the morning, and I'd do a grid section of the field, looking up to 400 sheep on these fields at one time, and then I'd drop into a little wood. I dropped into the wood, and the bracken and the fern were in full growth, and I'm only short. I'm only 5'6", so it's nearly 5 foot tall. I'm walking through it, and I heard robotic voices, or a robotic voice. And I've got my wife's little dog with me, which is he couldn't defend himself against a rabbit. To be honest with you, but anyway, I heard this voice, and I'm thinking, what do I do? Because I was unnerved, and there's nobody there. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm in a private wood. I'm in fields that have gone up a private road to get to these fields. I used to drive up with my headlights off so I didn't disturb. There were one other house on road that weren't connected to the farm. And I'm thinking, what do I do? And there were a field of borage, which is the purple. I think they make starflower oil out of it, the purple flower. There were a field. And I thought, shall I cross the field? That's how disturbed I was. I thought, shall I cross the field of borage? I mean, walking through a crop, which I don't do. So I kind of plucked up courage and I walked back, because it weren't imaginary. I didn't think, did I hear that voice? It was there. There was a robotic words were being spoken. And I went back, and I suppose Mick's question really is any of that similar to your experiences? And thanks for that question, Mick.
Yeah, thank you, Mick, for that question. It's a great question. And again, something I'm looking at, like how much of this is government stuff, and something I uncovered. And now for me, that whole terrifying night, and it starts with the hum, power goes out, bright light out of the boys' window, and then that weird electronic voice that I can hear it like it was yesterday, and no power in the house. But I came across something called laser ball technology, and I'm thinking, we're Air Force Academy, whoever, messing with this laser ball technology in the mid to late 70s, which is where they pipe out an electronic sounding human voice. But now hearing your experience, Paul, it makes me wonder if it's not connected to Tubi Guy or the boxes or whatever, because maybe it isn't, or maybe it's a combination of both, where this was happening and somebody experienced that and they're trying to back engineer the boxes or the electronic voice or the plasma ball or laser technology. I think both things. I just don't think it's a simple answer, but yes, it sounds identical to what I experienced.
I would agree. And, you know, some people would have said, well, you're in tall bracken, you know, fern, and could it have been somebody in a ghillie suit hidden in there, just monitoring and doing what you're doing? And I could, if there were another element to this, which are you okay for this, Katie? Because it's your show essentially. And
no, I love this. I like the conversation.
Well, I said there was one house that I didn't like disturbing because so I'd drive up with my headlights off. It was at that house I used to park up at actually, but when I got back one morning, he was about. Sometimes he'd bring me a coffee. So this rules out anybody in a ghillie suit or camouflage, because this is not the same day. This is like within a few days. And everything okay? Have you found any more? I said, no, all good this morning. He says, and he's got a little raised decking area and a pond, and at the side of it there was a field of corn. He said, I heard some strange voices last night, and he didn't mean in the night. He meant early evening. I says, where? He says, just there. He says, I was sat having a coffee, and I'm just sort of observing my pond. And this house is in the middle of nowhere. He says, and I said, well, where? He said, literally 20 foot into the corn. No tracks in corn, nothing. And it don't matter how stealthy you are. It's not that program Kung Fu. He's not treading some rice paper. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing. And this guy claims that he heard robotic voices 20 foot into the cornfield where he sat in his garden. So
and it's interesting. There's a little pond there. So you have the water element. It reminds me of Signs with the corn and that that movie terrified my daughter for so long.
Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson and Signs.
Sorry. Do you think, Paul, these robotic voices are linked to these mechanical sounds that's being heard? Are they one and the same, do you think?
It could be. I mean, that's something we can ask you, Katie, because we've heard strange, almost underground noises in places we wouldn't think we'd hear things, and other people have reported them. So what about sounds in the areas you've researched?
So in the APRO report, this is the original report from the ranch. One of the very first time, and even with my mom. So if people don't know, my mom was a computer or key punch operator for United Airlines in the Denver Tech Center. She was actually born in the state of Illinois, and in 1970 we moved to Colorado because they moved their operations to the Denver Tech Center. So we moved to Colorado. In 73, she divorced my dad. In 75, she meets this gentleman who owns the ranch. Okay. He's married to a woman named Betty. All the adults now on the ranch and in this report are now deceased. So I feel like I can give their true names because they use pseudonyms in the report. But Betty was the woman who was married to Jack. Jack and my mom were dating, and Betty was dating a man named John Duke. John Duke is an interesting character. And the more I'm learning about John Duke, the interesting it gets. So he comes from San Francisco in the late 60s, early 70s, and is part of the Air Defense Command. Okay. Right. And he's a guy who I feel like this is where the MK Ultra kind of stuff comes in. And the reports he talks about taking legal LSD. And when I talked about that Cone of Silence event we had in interviewing the ex-CIA agent, who, by the way, had property in the San Luis Valley, which connects to Snippy. But they were talking about people coming from San Francisco involved in these MK Ultra programs who are experimenting with people from state hospitals, mental institutions, and vagrants and homeless people with these FM drugs, which stood for freaking magic. Okay. Yeah. And so we have this strange character at the ranch. But one thing that was Jack, when they first bought the property, I can remember them talking about these bangs and hums and sounds underground. Right. And so you mentioned the bangs underground. And yes, that could be connected. It all could be connected to the strange boxes, to the sounds, to, all of it.
It's crazy, isn't it? You know, all these locations all around the world to some degree are displaying similar things. Are we more questions, Les?
Yeah, I've got Dogman TP Hunting question. Hey, Katie, with the mutilation cattle, they're expensive. What do ranchers claim under for insurance? Is there a box to tick? What do they do, Katie?
Yeah, that was a question we had even with Snippy, the horse case. And we're like, what is the motive for Burl to say Snippy's not Snippy and Snippy is Lady and on and on and on? We come to find out, and I'm glad it was documented. Again, so important to document things, but they did not have insurance on these horses. I know some ranchers have been able to write off losses and others may not. It just depends if you take out the policies or not. And quite frankly, I don't think they're necessarily easy. In this instance, when you have the veterinarians come in, it's a loss, right? I think they can write off a certain percentage on their taxes for a loss for their cattle ranches. But yeah, it's a huge loss. You're looking at $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a head. And just recently here near the San Luis Valley in Colorado, we had a case of 180 missing cattle just vanish.
What?
Yeah, if you look it up just look it up a search, 180 missing cattle in Colorado, it'll come up. And the vast majority of these are calves. So these are tagged animals. They're putting out bulletins, if they're crossing state lines, if they're just cattle wrestlers. I didn't know that cattle wrestling is still a thing. Like there's actually websites you could go to that have the cattle wrestling, people stealing cattle from ranches. So that is an ongoing problem. And I know that ranchers can, claim losses just for theft of their cattle as well. So yeah, it's a horrible.
Well, the fields with the sheep. I said it were ongoing when I started with it. I'm not certain of exact numbers, but something tells me I think he'd lost 28 when I got involved.
Wow. And
when we'd done, he'd lost 50 when it finished. That's a lot to suffer. It's not. We know that they're not as expensive as a cow,
right?
And they're a life as well. So let's not reduce this commodity to a pound, shillings, and pence or dollars. But at the end of the day, he suffered quite big losses, didn't he? This particular guy. But okay, Les.
Okay, a bit of we're at the point in time where we do a little bit of self-promotion here, guys. We'll just start with you. We'll start with you, Paul. You're at a conference, Paul, locally, and tell us
we're at the Awakening, and incidentally, we were hoping to meet up. Katie were going to come to one of the Awakening conferences, and things went a little bit pear-shaped, so it didn't happen. We were going to meet Trey Hudson as well, but for this Awakening, all British researchers and interested parties. We've got myself, Camilla, Barry Fitzgerald, Nick Kyle, and Sarah Kyle. They'll be well, I know Barry's talk. All the talks are going to be great. The one I'm looking forward to listening to, and I'm being biased here, is my good friend Ian Linford's, because Ian's not spoke at a conference before, and the stuff he's going to share will be really interesting. I've seen the presentation that's been put together. So that's when is it? Is it the 17th, Les? I'm not certain.
17th of May.
17th of May, yeah. And I think there's not been many tickets left, if there's any at all. So there's one to get to, guys. It's just a one-day event, that.
Okay, and
just briefly, if you the books. So all the books are available through the truthproof.uk website. Overseas sales now. Anybody listening to this, please visit eBay from the truthproof.uk website, because the postage is just becoming too expensive, and I can send them to the global shipping in just as a UK address. So and they will sort the overseas postage out for me. So that's that. The Kindle versions are also available on Amazon, and if you want to buy the DVD as an hard copy, you can do, and it's truthproof.uk or on eBay. Once again, same for eBay. If you're buying it and it's overseas, please purchase it off eBay. And it's also available via Amazon Prime download. And
and that's only for UK and USA though. So UK and USA.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you.
And Katie, I think we have your Rocky Mountain Ranch Research YouTube page, which is a fascinating page. We was on it earlier and pulling some videos off there, watching them. Fantastic. Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. First, I want to say your Wolflands is so important, and the work you're doing is so important. I think, I feel like we're kind of doing the same work, just in different lands, and making these box and robotic sounds, and just all of it ties together. But thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing my new YouTube channel. It's Rocky Mountain Ranch YouTube with Katie Paige, or Rocky Mountain Ranch Research with Katie Paige on YouTube. It's a new channel. I just wanted to kind of go on location, so I put together little videos. One of my favorite videos there, if you go to the videos tab, I don't know if you're live on there, but I interview the Wilsons, who live in Trinidad, Colorado, and they're also featured on Beyond Skinwalker. I'm trying to hit the 1,000 subscribers, so come on, guys, get me to 1,000. Get me to 1,000.
I would have said that. You're just about there, Katie. So
we're so close. Let's get us there.
I've just subscribed, Katie, live on it.
And I'm going to do that. And we've got over 200 people in chat. So please jump over after this.
It'd be so cool.
Katie's channel.
That'd be so cool. But some I talked to the Millers about, they're on Beyond Skinwalker, and they've had a lot of cattle mutilations as well. Very interesting, strange, bizarre ones. But I was interested in the hitchhiker phenomenon with them. And we had a great interview, and the interviews on this channel where we talk, there's 2 episodes, one about mutilations, one about their hitchhiker. They've had like butcher knives fly across the kitchen, hearing the disembodied, voices, conversations, paranormal things. But one thing I found fascinating in that interview was that they felt like even with the ranches where animal mutilations are occurring, that whatever this is also interested in the people that own the ranch. It's not just the animals, it's the people. And people will ask that, like, why does this connect to certain people and not others? What are the commonalities? And I think we're all looking for those kind of connections, to connect those dots. And to hear that from them, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. And they had the same thing. No matter where the Millers go, Tom and Sally Miller, the phenomenon follows them, just like it does me and you and others. And
there's so many things that you've said that'll hit the nail for a lot of people listening to this now and afterwards, because you're so right. On the cliff tops where we go and do a bit of research, Katie, well, quite a lot, you just know that sometimes, most of the time, it's boring and there's not a lot happening. We know that because this phenomena does not present to order, but there's a potential there. But what I'm saying is sometimes you'll take people out and you instantly know it's just going to fall flat on its backside. Nothing's going to happen. And it is the combination of the people as well and the location. You're so right.
For sure. Yeah, we've all experienced that. I mean, before I got into the UFO side of things, I really started in the paranormal world side of things, the ghost hunting and all that, with the Stanley. Yeah, that's the other thing we found out in the Snippy, back to Snippy a little bit. In the APRO documents, we have his whole birth story. So he was born in Estes Park, Colorado. And so we know his whole heritage and all that stuff. So, but Estes Park, Colorado is really well known for the Stanley Hotel from the movie The Shining, even though that hotel in The Shining, I think, was a hotel in Utah. But anyway, the story happened, his experience happened at the Stanley Hotel. And that's where Snippy was born. But I kind of started in that world, and it got me wondering, what is it about these certain locations and areas or people? Is it the land? Is it the person? Is it a combination of both? And and I think it's both. I think you're right.
I'm not saying both as though I know. I personally think so. And I see that.
Dr. Snippy Hunting is asking, did Snippy show any form of anxiety before the mutilation? Maybe a week before.
We do have a document stating that Snippy was very happy and playful, actually, the day before of his capture and mutilation. But what's interesting about that, and I'm trying to find the pictures here, there's going to be never seen pictures that were in the archives of poor Snippy here. Wow. But the other 2 horses that were with Snippy, so the researchers for APRO, the Richmonds, knew these horses well. So we have Lady, the mother, and Sheba. And they would come up to you, and they were very gentle horses and would take sugar cubes and all that. Well, after
traumatized afterwards.
After Snippy's mutilation, and let me find the pictures here in the book. We're resizing some of these right now. You know how you do when we get these just right. But let me find them here. I should have marked this before. Like I said, this just came yesterday, so you guys are the first to kind of see this. But we have pictures of the investigator trying to approach both Lady and Sheba. And they were both very skittish after what happened to Snippy. And what's really cool about that, for the first time, we have the photographs of Lady and Sheba after Snippy's death. So there's no question anymore that Snippy is Snippy.
You've got the right horse, and nobody's trying to muddy the waters. They can't do it anymore.
Right. Hold on, I'm almost there.
Okay. You'll find it when you don't want it, Katie.
Right. I think it's in the very first chapter, which is probably right here.
Yeah. While you're looking for that, I'm interested in the flashes of light that you talked about earlier. So in the locations that you've, I wouldn't say researched, I'm on about this. Oh, okay, go on.
There it is.
Trying to approach the horses.
There's Lady and Sheba, and what's really cool, you can see the pictures were written on underneath, so you can see the caption, like this caption right here. It says basically, I don't have my glasses with me. My desk is now a mess. They fell on the ground. Hold on, let me get my glasses. I can read this caption for you. It says, Lady, Snippy's mother. These two horses, Sheba and Lady, were the horses that were with Snippy in the pasture when killed. Only witnesses to Snippy's murder is what that says.
The only witnesses. Yeah.
And that's something. I mean, what a treasure to find that.
What a
you
treasure.
You can see them going off. Yeah. They're just,
think of
they're
the trauma,
skittish.
Though. Absolutely. It's frightening. It
All
really
right,
is.
I'll be back probably at the end of the show, guys. Oh,
okay, Les. Yeah. So Katie, be as brief as you want with this, but you talked about flashes of light earlier. So, so before you went onto the ranch, as a sort of researcher, did you experience flashes of light anywhere and think, God, it's just night's just come today in the blink of an eye, because we're seeing this in this location, and I just wondered if you're experiencing it.
I mean, for me, being the age I was when all this really high strangeness was hitting its peak, I mean, I'm 9, 10, 11, 12 years old.
Not looking for that.
And, in 1977, you have Close Encounters of the Third Kind that comes out, and they have animal mutilations and all these weird things happening. And I'm thinking that's a documentary film. Like, I'm living that kind of, I didn't know it was like the science fiction fantasy film. So it was normalized for me. But in investigating all the similarities to Snippy the horse, something that's one of the coolest things, the night of Snippy's capture and abduction, there's a very haunted, interesting little cemetery in the San Luis Valley known as the Uraca Cemetery. And unfortunately, like so many people in this era, Agnes King had many children, I think 12 children. She lost 6 of them before she died. And she had a set of twins, which is also another interesting connection to the phenomenon. You hear a lot of twin connections. So she had a set of twins, Faye and May. And May King dies of like a pneumonia or a sickness when she's 12 years old. And she's said to haunt the Uraca Cemetery. And there's been orbs of lights and crafts flying around the San Luis Valley during this time. So there is a family actually at the Uraca Cemetery looking across the valley for unusual things the night of Snippy's capture. And they actually witness lights, like you just mentioned, Paul, over the King Ranch the night of Snippy's capture. So there is a witness to Snippy's abduction. And the fact that Snippy's dropped from above with no tracks, and you have to remember it rained, it was muddy. You could see tracks. There was nothing around this horse. So it's such a well-documented case.
It's really sort of got under your skin, this one, Katie, hasn't it? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And where do you see the research going now? Are there any parts of what you're looking into that you never thought you would become involved in? And I talk about the cryptids because I never thought I'd be even remotely interested in that.
Yeah, there's a cryptid element to this too, and there's a cryptid element to, now as an investigator and researcher, we even put in the book, maybe they're bear tracks. They're unusual looking bear tracks if they're bear tracks. I'm always trying to debunk and look. Yeah, but they're unusual tracks, and they have them photographed in this book. And if you come out to Contact in the Desert, I'm doing the whole presentation on this. So it's going to be mostly all the photographs, and they're in the book as well. But there's the definite cryptids in the Rocky Mountain Ranch as well, the white fuzzies and the Bigfoot. And there's the weird boxes. And
the Bigfoot? What are your thoughts? What are they some kind of natural, undetected hominid, or are they? Is there a woo factor to these things? What's your thoughts?
Okay. Don't judge me.
No,
I'm not the first person to come up with this. There's, but I think there's a certain section of the Sasquatch that are connected to the craft. And I do think there is a mutilation connection to them. I've seen multiple mutilation cases where they have a cryptid element to it. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, even with my sister who went to the high school prom and went to the ranch, the Rocky Mountain Ranch back in the 70s, had a terrifying encounter. I mean, these things were menacing. They were watching from the tree line, from the barn. They were pounding on things and I mean, kind of just crazy
encounter.
Yeah, my sister's encounter. And
unless you've just told us it, do you want to just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, she's like terrified about it, and she doesn't even like talking about it much. So I'm sorry, Chris, if you're watching this. But after the high school prom, which is a small little high school, it's like a graduating class of 7 in this little town of Kiowa, they go back to the ranch and have a terrifying encounter with a Sasquatch being in strange lights and they took off, and it terrified her. But she's a very matter-of-fact person. She'll kind of say, like, to her, it felt like they were like bodyguards or workers or something connected to the craft. And Stan Gordon talks about it in his book years ago, that some of these seem to be connected to the craft or the ETs, or are they ETs themselves? Are they a species of ET? And if you think about these animals, these large elk and cow, these are big animals. And so somebody came up to me after a conference, and we were talking about these strange boxes and how they emit these strange hums and sounds. And somebody said, could they be emitting a sound or a frequency that are calming or keeping the animals calm and like paralyzed in a sense before the mutilations? Are the Sasquatch manhandling or doing something with the cattle? And interviewing ranchers here in Colorado, one of the ranchers told me that in the pastures where the mutilations are occurring, the animals are huddled together and pretty calm. In adjoining pastures, they're like freaked out and flipping out. So are the Sasquatch, the boxes, and the mutilations somehow tied together? And was our government or whoever, military, aware of some of this stuff, and they're trying to figure it out and back engineer it and make their own? And I don't know, but that's kind of where I'm at with it. So I think there's a connection.
Do you know?
I have 1,000 subscribers! Yay! Thank you. That's awesome.
That's brilliant. That's superb. I'm really
thank you, everybody. Seriously, thank you. That's pretty cool.
Well, that's great, that, Katie. And what we're going to say, myself and Chris Turner, because myself and Les made Wolflands, and we're on with another documentary now. We're calling it Wolflands 2, but it'll probably end up with another title. But myself and Chris made a documentary called Bringing Down the Light. And in Bringing Down the Light, and it ties in with what you've just been talking about, we interviewed this lady called Elaine, who lived on the Wolds, which is a remote area on the East Yorkshire Wolds. And she was driving home one night, and as she's driving down this sort of single track road with little pull-ins, she can see some lights sweeping around, and they're in the air. They look like they're low, and she's thinking that there's people potentially on the road, I don't know, maybe half a mile in front with a powerful torch. But unusually, these lights are orange. And as she rounds a corner, she says she called it a herd, but there were 8 or 9 roe deer huddled together on the road.
Oh, wow.
And she said there was spheres of orange light above them. I mean, she allowed us to film us, which were very kind of her, because not everybody wants to admit that they've seen this kind of stuff. Unbelievably, I got this story. She were actually a dressmaker and doing alterations for our daughter's wedding dress. And she came and we just got talking, and she told us this story, and then it went from there. But anyway, she braked to avoid hitting these deer, turned off the road and crashed through an edge and went down into a field. So it becomes interesting then for Elaine, because she said she was wedged between 2 trees and she had to climb out of the back door. But when she looked, she said these lights were coming down the field, and she still thought that there were people coming to help her. And she got out, and she'd got missing time. She's no recollection of anything happening. The missing time for this lady, Elaine, was the fact that she were only probably 15 minutes from home, and she weren't injured as such, apart from shook up, and she managed to get home, but I think it took her a couple of hours, and she can't understand how that were even possible. But that's an association with spheres of light above animals and having some kind of nullifying effect, because she said they just looked bemused and she just spun off the road. So
there's so many reports of missing time in the Snippy case. Driving near the San Luis Valley, out there by the Great Sand Dunes, these roads go just straight for long periods of time, and people are seeing, like you said, different colors. They're reported as orange, sometimes oblong, sometimes sphere shaped, sometimes white, sometimes even blue, a blue light on the back. But we have reports of people chasing these things and missing miles and miles, and it's almost like going through some sort of time portal or something, where they should only be this far, but they're actually this far. Many sky watches were done out there at the King Ranch, and there's reports of missing time.
And the people. Lights that kind of tail motor vehicles. People are aware on a lonely road that they're being followed by a sphere of light, and it becomes almost like a cat and mouse. There's loads of reports of that. What about, because this word seems to be coming up quite a lot with different people, what about shadow type entities, shadow type beings? Have you experience of anything like that?
Yeah, more so when I was younger, in my early, like 12, 13, 14, and you hear this with younger people. Every now and again, in high times of stress, sometimes weird things like that'll happen. But yeah, I've definitely encountered that. But I talked to multiple people who are still encountering that to this day. So that's a part of it as well.
Why do you think then? When I say why, Katie, I don't expect you to have an answer. I'm just curious to your opinion. Why do you think it's at times of stress that a lot of these things, not just shadow type entities, a lot of these things manifest, and we sometimes things of a ghostly or poltergeist type activity occurs?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing too, because I don't know if it's two different phenomenon where we're dealing with some shadow type beings that are more ET related, and then we, of course, have our paranormal experience with past loved ones, or grandma or grandpa or mom. My mom passed in July, and I had some interesting interactions with lights, of all things, after my mom passed, happened twice. So can we differentiate what is, grandma ghost and what is a shadow? Sometimes they're taller, more like 6 feet. Some people think they're demonic in nature, and that's quite frightening. I don't know if that's true or not true, but there are ways to protect yourself if you think you are being harassed by something more dark in nature. Like, put that protection around you. You have power to stop it and to tell them to leave you alone, kind of thing. So it's interesting that maybe we're dealing with a whole realm or different realms that we don't quite understand and know. And I don't have the answers. I'm just saying, like,
or are we dealing with one in the same when we're talking about shadow type entities? And are we dealing with one type of intelligence that can be all things to all men or all women? Do you know what I mean? And just fits the category or what it thinks it needs to do. Maybe it's a form of communication. Maybe the fear, when people feel extreme fear, when they're suffering from some kind of anxiety and stress, and these things interact. Let's assume that they've not got great intelligence. The unknown other. Maybe it thinks that's how to interact. Maybe it thinks
that's why they show up when they do. Sometimes these darker shadow beings. I mean, maybe they do. Maybe it's part of that soul recycler, or feeding off of our energies, both positive and negative. We all know that our state of minds and the way we perceive things definitely change what happens in our lives. If we're in dark, low energy, and a lot of times when you're dealing with the unknown and the paranormal, it can cause PTSD type symptoms, and depression, feeling different, feeling isolated. And those are all, no pun intended, but those are all demons and battles we have to fight against. And maybe there's certain, whatever these shadow things are, that feed on that. And so we need to be awakened to the fact that we have power and control over where we put our energy, and
So what about you then, Katie Paige, when you go to these locations, do you actively try and connect with the unknown other, or are you just there to absorb the surroundings and talk to a witness, or do you go out there thinking, like, how do I engage with this?
Yeah, I think for, the first time back on Beyond Skinwalker, it felt almost like an out-of-body experience, because I had been researching and studying and getting documents. I haven't stepped foot back on this property. COVID hit and all this. I hadn't met the family yet. So when you see me meeting Greg and Chris and Nicole, that's the first time we're meeting. And I bring in this whole stack of documents, and we're sharing for a couple hours, and I didn't know what they had experienced, what they knew or didn't know. So it was this whole meeting of the minds. And for me, I think I was so just overwhelmed with the sensations of what I remember, how I was going to feel, how they were going to react, that it was all kind of not a daze, but kind of just a fuzzy out of body feeling for me.
Absolutely.
But now I feel so, since there's so many different parts to this, both from the secret MK Ultra side of things to the actual phenomenon, other people that are starting to come forward. Now I'm just a matter of like collecting and talking even with the Millers and this hitchhiker phenomenon that's so interesting to me, and things that weren't on the show. People don't realize that next day filming, when I had that blizzard, we had the day off of filming. I'm in Castle Rock, Colorado. My daughter comes and we're just going to go shopping, for warmer clothes at the outlet malls, have lunch at Red Robin, get a burger. Well, my left shoulder started bothering me. And we go back to the hotel. I'm like, is there something? And there was this, it looks like this. It's a big radiation burn on my back. I had several layers of clothing on. It, to me, looks like a handprint. It was hot to the touch. It blistered. I called the producers right away. I said, look, this happened to me last night. And of course, immediately people are thinking it's demonic or something bad or scary. But I tend to look at it as, here I am going in this blizzard. There was barbed wire fencing, and I actually fell forward in the snow, fell forward. I'm wondering if whatever that was trying to help me get back up. But as far as as far as protection goes, I was out in Arizona doing a training boot camp, and the ex-paranormal rangers, John Dover and Stan Milford Jr., were out there. And John, he knows of the work I do out on the ranch. And he's like, I normally don't do this for people that are outside of the tribe and that, but he took me and did a whole ceremony and walked me through the ways of protection that I can do before I go back onto the ranch property. And I've modified that to my own kind of needs. I don't go through the whole thing, but I do have kind of a way that I start, from the ground. I ground myself. I put a protection of white light around me, go in with good intentions, and certainly don't go in with fear.
Yeah. So how much of that then do you think? And I'm not I don't know, disrespecting what you were told there, but how much of that do you think is just placebo and the power of our own mind is giving you that protection?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that was. Maybe it's part of me going, I don't want it. I don't want to think it's anything scary or negative attached to me or whatever. So I could just be being super naive with that. I don't know, but I had. So you're interested in the attachments, the sort of, what do we call it, the hitchhiker effect. I call it we're like host victims for whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But do you think these things actually attach to us, or do you just think they're just a thought process away, meaning we can connect with these things just when we start thinking about them, their eyelids flicker and we're back with you kind of thing? Or do you think these things actually not physically attach, but somehow they're with us all the time after we've been there? I think of it like this. There's a good photograph of, it's sort of like the ethers, or this network of outer space, like a web of some sort of connectivity between all things, right? All beings, all people, all animals. And I feel like what we talked about earlier, when you somehow disassociate from our physical realm and we're connected into that, even psychics, the Long Island Medium or Tyler Henry, and they're studying their brains, and parts of their brain are activating that typically doesn't for others when they're getting these readings or connecting into this network. I guess if we're all zeros and ones and we're a network computer, and we're plugging into a network. So I think there's some of us out there, or a lot of us, thousands, millions of us out there that are more connected or aware of being connected into the network than others, or we're connected in different ways. And I feel like for me personally, whatever I connected into through the trauma, I had a half brother who was an arsonist. I had 2 houses burned down, a lot of violence, alcoholic father, all that trauma that happened to me as a younger child. And I disassociated and tried to, be safe. You got to read when you have a father, and sorry, Dad, but when you have a father, and he was out of my life by the time I'm 7 years old or whatever. So during the ranch years, he was moved out of the house. But in my early years, you have a violent father, and you have to look and be intuitive. So you're connecting into that intuitive side. So you've probably heard, Paul, through all the people you've interviewed on your show. So many people are artists, musicians, singers. They're very creative, and they're really wired into that intuitive side. To me, that plays a huge part of all of this, because that connects us into that web. And once we have that connection, it never goes away. And you can turn it up, turn it down, turn it up, turn it down. You can pay attention, not pay attention, but we play a big role in that. And once you have that established, it's always with you. And I think that's the case with me, and why the radios reacted to me. And I can't tell you what happens in next season, but they tried it again with my sister, and you have to watch that to see what happens.
But I won't do. But you talked about advanced abilities or gifts. So have you noted with the people you've spoken to, and maybe yourself, maybe your immediate family, after an experience, you become more intense, you want to write more, you maybe write poetry, you might want to be inspired to write songs or paint. That seems to happen. We seem to be given something, don't we? Or we're not given something, but some kind of openings in our own minds of, I don't know, are lifted, or we can do things that we couldn't do before.
Yeah, you think about a lot of the greats have these stories as well in history, right? Where they feel downloaded or inspired, or they get some sort of, and I think we're all able to pay attention and get those downloads. You even hear about wonderful inventions throughout mankind that, you have somebody thinking of it here in the UK and somebody over here in the United States, they get the download roughly around the same time. The wonderful thing happens. That actually happens. So synchronicities increase in our lives. Inspirations increase in our lives. All these things, if you're paying attention. Even this book, Snippy, this came to me through, like, in the middle of the night. I literally woke up in the middle of the night. I felt like this vortex of energy. It inspired me. And on the other side of this coin, the King family was having similar experiences of being kind of, call it downloaded or inspired by their Aunt Nellie. The two of us came together. It felt very, something else was kind of leading us to do this and open this up, and here we are. So if you're paying attention, this happens. These synchronicities are just mind-blowing.
Before unless Les's got 15 minutes of questions, and he probably has, I was just going to ask you about any other members of your family that are experiencing things. You might not want to touch on that. It's up to you. But
no, it's fine. So, I found out my grandfather, he was in the Navy. He was a Mason. He lived in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. He had a case investigated by J. Allen Hynek in the early 60s. Yeah, over Lake Como. So he had an encounter. My mom and I would tell us stories about us going back from our home, from their home in Wisconsin to our home in Illinois. We would go across the state lines, and we had a sighting of an oblong-shaped craft in Richmond. My mom, claimed to see the apparition of my father's deceased mother at the foot of her bed. So yes, my mom, and she passed this last July. She was 92 years old. But it was interesting. My sister and I would try to talk to my mom about the ranch years, out there at the Rocky Mountain Ranch. Sometimes she would have memories of things and like kind of be open. Most of the time, however, she would shut down.
Yeah,
it was a really interesting, I don't know what that was about. Like, I know we were threatened and warned not to talk about, so I don't know if she still had some fear around that or what, but it was hit or miss with my mom. But she definitely had stuff throughout her life.
It's a miss with your mum, and your mum's telling truth. You know your mum as well as anybody in the world's going to know your mum. So, and I do believe that. And do you think, though, that after an experience, there's some mechanism or some exotic science at play that actually wants those memories to drop out at back of your head, because people do seem it does dissipate after a time. And you said earlier, have a journal, write it down if it's happened. And I thought to myself, just absolutely spot on. Anybody listening to this, you probably already know, guys, in chat, if you're listening to it afterwards, but write those quirky little things down, because you won't remember in 6 months' time. Chances are you won't.
Right. And another interesting phenomenon, I hear this with other experiencers as well. It's like the phenomena itself only gives us information when we're meant to get it. I can't tell you how many times I've read over documents and reports and articles and just glaze over certain parts of it. And then a couple years later, I'm like, oh, what about this? Oh, and it turns into this big thing. And I'm like, why didn't I notice that 2 years ago? It's like you're just kind of meant to get what you're supposed to get when you get. Yeah, it's the weirdest kind of thing. Yeah, well, I don't know. But
I'm going to pull. Are you good for 10 minutes of questions?
I'm great. Yeah, I was going to tell you too. My mom was very much interested in this. She also was Rh negative and got really into looking into the DNA of things and her history. And so oftentimes this is generational with family. So if anybody's out there and you're talking to somebody who has experiences, ask about the family. Has your mom, has your uncle, oftentimes you'll find, oh, wait a minute,
I don't mind saying this because I've written about it in Night People, but a few days before my dad passed away, I can't say exactly when, but I used to visit him every day in hospital after work, and my mum were waiting for me. She says, he wants to talk to you. And he claimed that the aliens had visited him in the night. Could have been medication he were on. Do you know what I mean? I'll play devil's advocate. I'll sit there on the fence because we don't know.
Right.
He didn't know what they'd spoken to him about. But he said that seriously, he couldn't remember what but they visited him, and he said aliens. He didn't say his deceased dad or anything. He said aliens. I found that quite telling. But I don't know.
How interesting is that? Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
So, Les, have we got some questions, mate?
Sure have, guys. And just before we go with the questions, I'd just like to ask Katie this. You've talked about like being on an individual basis of opening up and being aware of your surroundings, etc., etc. How important do you think like a collective approach to all this phenomena will that improve our understanding? I know we're networking now, you could say, you're in America, we're in the UK. And do you think if we got together more as a collective, this phenomena will be solved?
That's where it's going to come from. I have given up a long time ago on hearing from any official government source on a disclosure. Disclosure is going to come from what you and I and Paul, all of us are doing, all the listeners, all the viewers, all the people connecting and talking and putting these pieces together. Even the weird outlier stuff like this crazy gateway project, all these little clues. The conversation I had with Jeff McBurney just this morning about what they're uncovering at Mount Wilson Ranch on that strange lamp they pulled out and the symbolism on there, and what that means and how that ties into it, and exposing some of these deeper, possibly darker secrets and the powers in control and the powers that be that are keeping us all down. It's by us talking and doing what we're doing right now that, yes, history is important, talking, communicating, doing podcast sharing. We all have to be brave and just face it, no matter what it is, and make the connections. And I think that's what we're all trying to do. Before
you get a question, Les, because I just want to read this. I don't normally read other people's questions, but there's a guy in chat called James Norton. That's Jimmy Norton. And we're friends from 40 years ago. And I don't think I've seen him in 40 years, but I know it is because he says, Heather's asking after Mary. That's my wife. Sends a regard. So I'll tell Mary, and thanks, Jim. And it's great to see you, mate. Well, not to see you, see your name, but thank you. Sorry about that. Go on.
Well, that kind of illustrates all this collectiveness.
Brilliant. I had loads of time for that guy. I always had and I still have. So
not a question, but just some info. And let's have a look. Tina. A farm above Todmorden has been plagued by animal mutilation since the 1950s. Now, Todmorden is it Lancashire? The other side of the country to us, but it is an absolute hotspot, isn't it, Paul?
It really is, yeah. And that's cattle mutilations as well. And once again, location is key.
Yeah, is that near to where they get the crop circles in that area? Is that a hot spot for crop circles?
No,
not really.
I don't think it's renowned for crop circles, Katie, but
That's more in Wiltshire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another area I'm like, okay, they're all men with boards. That's what we're all told to believe. I don't think they all are, maybe some, but not all of them. But yeah, why certain locations, something I'd like to say about that. If you're in a high strangeness location, whether paranormal or UFOs or ETs, if you can find out what the magnetism in the area is, if there's aquifers underground, if there's water sources, the geological, I think that's something that more work can be done in some of these hotspots, even around mutilations. Maybe look into the ranchers themselves. Is there a family history of unusual things tied to the families, like with the Wilsons and things like that, or the Millers? I mean, not the Wilsons, the Millers and other ranchers. Why are certain ranchers being hit and others not? Those are at least a few things you can look into: the magnetism of the area, the water features, the geologicals, and the families themselves, and see if you could start keeping logs of these hot spots around. And I think together maybe we can figure something out.
And as there are ancient earthworks and burial grounds in the area, which kind of tells you that the ancient peoples knew the significance of that land as well.
Right.
So, go on,
same in San Luis Valley is known. I mean, it is like the belly button of the earth right there in the San Luis Valley. And so much so that these different tribes that would go into the valley, the Ute and the Cheyenne, all these different tribes, they would not battle or war because it was such a sacred location. And same with where the ranch of my childhood is in Elbert County, same kind of thing. It's very nomadic, many different tribes, very sacred ground. So that's a good point.
Thank you.
Okay, how important do you think modern technology is able to help with this phenomena, Katie, or do you think it should be a more primeval approach in our brain, our sensitivity, or do we have to rely on technology? Do you think to solve some of this?
Yeah, I think technology is going to be a huge help if we use it correctly. Like just for an example, the great archives that Dave has out in Albuquerque, he's going through, painstakingly making sure to digitize all this stuff, all this historical data from the original recordings. The things that we can learn from this is phenomenal. So to have all these documents now in PDFs digitized, and we can go through, and now we can let a smart AI computer correlate a lot of this data, find all the boxes. Like now we could go ask, Grok, hey, how many, it could just scans things so fast, and how many cubes and boxes. And so in that regard, it's invaluable to us.
It's a valuable tool.
How we use it is going to be on us, right? So I think it's both.
Okay, Mike, disabled Welshman, and I agree with you, Mike. Your spelling on this is atrocious. Casey, do you think that I don't know if he's talking about the mutilations, could be alien in nature, or do you think it's Earth-based? And he's apologizing for his spelling.
I think these hums and bangs and things underground, I mean, I'm one that kind of believes that it would make complete sense that there's been tunneling done underground. And we know the military bases and stuff in New Mexico to Colorado. We have, NORAD in Colorado Springs. I'm right here by the base of Pikes Peak, where I live currently. So it wouldn't surprise me even through Elbert County with the Denver International Airport. In the future now, obviously in the late 70s and 80s, it was Stapleton. But we know that probably out there, out east, there could very well be tunneling from these different locations under the United States. It would not surprise me whatsoever. And out there in Taos, maybe what we're hearing are generators. Even out in Mount Wilson, there's things buried underground out there that they're digging. So many rumors of a Howard Hughes connection and bases underground. So I think that's probably our answer for some of these bangs, hums, and sounds.
And we never touched on Mount Wilson, really, did we? But we've not got time tonight now, but we will do, I'm sure.
Yeah, we need Jeff back on here. You need to have Jeff on.
We do,
yeah. I know you touched on this earlier. Katie, is the ranch, was it on Indian territory in the past at all?
Yeah, very much so. Elbert County, the whole Midwest, actually, all the United States. But in that area, particularly by the Palmer Divide, was very sacred. It was very nomadic. So we had the Ute, Cheyenne, Comanche, Pawnee, Kiowa. I mean, and some of these tribes were they were together making alliances with one another. And then we had, they were battling each other. Then we had the Sand Creek Massacre, which was horrific. And actually, John Dover from the Paranormal Rangers, he has ancestors that were part of the Sand Creek Massacre out here in Colorado. That's in that same area. So there was a lot of horrific battles between warring tribes and, all of us, the white man coming in for the gold rush and headed out to California. So yes, very much so. A lot of history there.
Okay, and I think we're going to finish with one question from Rick Allen. Have Katie's own belief system changed as she has researched deeper and deeper?
Mm-hmm. My belief systems, I go back and forth so often. And, like I mentioned earlier, I can't help but be intrigued by this whole simulated reality that we're living in. I don't know if that's true or not. It's certainly something that interests me right now. But it's definitely changed where I'm just open. I'm an open book. I used to compartmentalize myself much more and be more skeptical. It took me a long time to get on board with cryptids, for example, or this or that or the other thing. I used to be in the camp like ghosts exist because I've experienced ghosts, but I don't know about the rest of it. And even sometimes with aliens and abduction, I'm still like ebb and flow. Like, are we being visited? But there's just so much out there that now when I meet somebody, I listen with an open mind to whatever they experience, because maybe it is us. Maybe we're creating this. I don't know. But it's definitely it's changed, and for sure.
On that note, that was our last question, and we've got to thank Katie for coming onto the show, Paul.
Absolutely. Thanks, Katie. You've made it so easy.
Thank you.
It's been give us 2 hours of your time, and thanks everybody for taking the time to listen tonight. And I hope people listening in the future enjoy it as well, half as much as myself and Les. Right.
And thank you for the 1,000 subscribers. What a milestone. So here.
Yeah. We paid them well, Katie. We paid them well. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
For all our regulars, we'll see you all on Sunday evening. See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.